15 years ago, National Community Church was meeting in a DC public school on Capitol Hill. There was nothing easy about our first year. Total church income was $2,000 a month, and it cost $1,600 just to rent the school. On a good Sunday, we'd start with 8 or 10 or 12 people. That's when I learned to close my eyes and worship, because it was too depressing to open them. To be honest, I didn't really feel like a pastor. The church didn't really feel like a church. I felt underqualified and overwhelmed, but that's when God has you right where He wants you. Why? Because it forces you to pray like it depends on God. It forces you to your knees. It forces you to live in raw dependence upon God. And raw dependence is the raw material out of which God performs His greatest miracles. Well, one day as I was dreaming about the church that God wanted to establish here on Capitol Hill, I felt prompted by the Holy Spirit to do a prayer walk. I was reading through the book of Joshua, and one of the promises jumped off the page and into my spirit. It says, "I will give you everywhere you set your foot, just as I promised Moses." Well, as I read that promise given to Joshua, I felt like God wanted me to stake claim to the land He had called us to and pray a perimeter all the way around Capitol Hill. Part of me didn't want to do it because it was a hot and humid August morning, but I had this holy confidence that just as that promise had been transferred from Moses to Joshua, that God would transfer that promise to me if I had enough faith to circle it. And so I drew what would be my first prayer circle, and it still ranks as the longest prayer walk I've ever done. Starting at the front door of our row house on Capitol Hill, I walked east on F Street and turned south on 8th Street. I crossed East Capitol and Pennsylvania Avenue. I walked all the way to the Navy Yard and turned west on M Street. And then north on South Capitol Street. I paused to pray on the west steps of the Capitol that face the National Mall, and then I completed the 4.7-mile prayer circle by walking around Union Station and heading home. It's hard to describe what I felt when I finished praying that circle. My feet were sore, but my spirit soared. I felt that same kind of holy confidence the Israelites must have felt when they crossed the Jordan River on dry ground and finally stepped into the Promised Land for the first time. It took about 3 hours to complete that prayer circle, but God's been answering that prayer for the last 15 years. Since that August day that I drew that prayer circle around Capitol Hill, National Community Church has grown from a core group of 19 people into one church with 7 locations around the Metro DC area. And God's given us the privilege of influencing tens of thousands of people over those 15 years. But it all started with a prayer circle. I believe that every blessing, every breakthrough, every miracle, every dream has a genealogy. And if you trace it all the way back to its origin, you'll find a prayer circle. Those blessings and breakthroughs and miracles and dreams are the byproduct of prayers that were prayed by you or for you. During my prayer walk around the hill, I drew circles around things I didn't even know how to ask for. Without even knowing it, I walked right by a crack house that would become Ebenezer's Coffee House, which we now own and operate. I walked under the marquee of an old movie theater on Barracks Row that's now our 7th campus, and I prayed around an $8 million piece of property that we now own debt-free, where we'll build a future campus. If I had not drawn those prayer circles, I don't think we would own those properties. You see, God is determined that certain expressions of His power will only be exercised in response to prayer. Simply put, we have not because we ask not. Or maybe I should say, we have not because we circle not. The greatest tragedy in life are the prayers that go unanswered because they go unasked. But if you have the courage to circle the promise, circle the dream, circle the miracle, you never know how or when or where God might answer that prayer.